my favorites is Psalm 19, as you know, and I think the boys memorized it, starting with verse 7 through 11. And David just goes and hammers how much he loves the law of the Lord. And he calls it the law. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. And then he talks about them being more to be desired than gold and sweeter than honey. And at the end on verse 11 there, it says, moreover, by them is your servant warned, in keeping them there is great reward. I think that's just beautiful.
Welcome to the Recap Book Chat. We are a mother and daughter duo
conversing about books over a cup of joe.
Seeking truth to help us glow.
Ready, set, let's grow!
And welcome to the Recap Book Chat. Thank you so much for stopping by. Today we're continuing our journey through the Bible, and we're going to dive into the book of Psalms, which is actually broken into, as you can see by Mom's picture, 5 books. Chapters 1 through 41 are going to be book 1, book 2, chapters 42 through 72, and so on, as you can see. So today we're going to be covering book 1. That's a cool, thank you for showing that. That's perfect.
Yeah, a little visual goes a long way.
Yeah.
Written mostly by David today, which makes it
Very
easy.
Davidic.
Yeah.
Very. And we love David.
Yes.
We love his heart.
Quite the journey. A man after God's own heart.
I would have to say his Psalms are probably my favorite.
Yes. I think the journey that you see should be all of us should be aspiring to be like David. He was always, you think about the confrontation with Nathan when Nathan said, "You're the man," which is later, but I mean, he does not defend himself. He does not get mad. And that's how we want to be. If someone tells us how to grow closer to God, why would you argue with them? No.
That's a good point.
But I started back and I thought, I thought this was interesting that David wrote about half the Psalms. There's 150 altogether. We're doing just the first 41, but he wrote almost all. I think he wrote all of those together. In all out of 150, he wrote 73.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and that I think most of them, the lament is one kind of prayer formula, and the other is thanksgiving, and I think that's why people relate to David, because you really are either you're thanksgiving and you're excited about that, or you are lamenting. You said it once about those Amazon reviews. You said they're either people that loved it or hated it. I mean, you said it's never like someone, yeah, it was okay. It did all right.
You'll find a couple of those. I look for those. I'm like, where are those people at?
Yeah. But most of the time it's like extreme, 1 star or 5 stars. It's funny. You're right. And you hear people say, "Oh, I'm writing a review."
Like this. That's true. Which really, that's what the book of Psalms is for. If you've ever felt surrounded by enemies, if you felt betrayed by friends, overwhelmed with life, upset, or extremely happy, or any of those, what you're talking about, the book of Psalms is for you because it is very personal. It's raw. It really feels almost like you're reading someone's private journal, which you kind of are. But I mean, the first book is about David. But I love how it's written. You just see his heart, and he lays it all out there. What he's feeling, what he's thinking, what he's going through.
And in chapter 1, it says, but his delight is in the law of the Lord. And that's kind of the theme of David. He does delight in the law of the Lord. He meditates on the law of the Lord. He cherishes it. At one point he said, it's like a tree planted by the water. That's how you get where he was. Spend a lot of time in the text. You spend that time and then slow down and meditate on it. I mean, sometimes we'll say, okay, I read 40 Psalms today. Really? Okay. But it might have been better if you read 1 and meditated on it. We don't like
but that's
meditating.
It's a performance lens. We as a society have a performance lens where we want to perform. We think the more we do, the better. So I think you You bring a very good point. Sometimes less is more.
Yeah. And I'm bad about that, but as I get older, God's teaching me a little bit about that because I can't do it as much as I could. And I'm slowing down. And I said, I can't believe I missed that. There's even like they're saying a lullaby effect when you read the Bible. Because yeah, I've read this, I read this, I read that. And if you slow down, you get a lot more instead of saying, yeah. And I was wrong. He did not write Psalm 10 or Psalm 33. So just to back the truck up. But yeah, because I looked at Psalm 10 and I said, oh, wait a minute. It doesn't say that he wrote those. So, but most of all the prayers, there's distress or there's statements of confidence. And some people may say David was bipolar. I mean, I think we all have our moments where we are confident. And
he had a lot going on.
He did. He had a lot going on. And he brought, we keep saying we're reading the awe of God. And we are, but we're not finished yet. Because,
hey, we're taking it slow.
He said to read it slowly. Yeah. But in chapter 2, he says something about serving the Lord with fear. David has that holy fear of God, and that, I don't think we realize how important that is. It comes down, when you take it all away, what is it? Trust. He just totally trusts God. That God, because who else would be anointed? And then he's almost killed by King Saul over and over again. And, most people would have said, hey, I thought I was anointed. What's up with this?
And most people would be okay with defending yourselves. When the guy's trying to kill you, you're like, hey, could have taken out Saul numerous times and he didn't because he was God's anointed. Because, going back to what you said, he feared God. When God anointed someone, and that person, if their behavior good or bad, it didn't matter to David. God put that person in that position. He wasn't going to be the one to take him out. He felt God should be the one. And that is fear of the Lord. That's a piece of fear of the Lord. That respect and that
humility.
The humility and just that awe. Like you are just way far above me. So I'm just going to follow your lead. And in Proverbs, it says that the fear of the Lord is the fountain of life that like frees us from the snares of death or something like that. So it is super vital. And I love that you pulled that out because that's why David is the fear of the Lord.
And that, that's what everybody wants because they always go back. If you said name a king, most everybody would say King David. I mean, and you would think people would say King Solomon. Wouldn't you? I mean, he's the wisest man that ever lived. But most people, if you just ask them to name one king, I think most of the time people would say David. Even, you remember Joab and the people that were with him, they would even say, kill him. Now's your chance. I mean, to think that, because that's peer pressure, and also exhaustion and probably hunger. And he was human because we know that he's human because in the story of Abigail, he did get mad and he was going to kill Nabal, but Abigail jumped in. It's like God was helping him, but he was he's the one that says, incline my heart to you, God. I love that. I've even started praying that because I want my heart to be inclined to do what God wants me to do so I can please him. And that prayer, and I'm sure he prayed that and God used Abigail to answer that. And that's a beautiful story.
That's true. And you're right. We do know he's human. Because he does make mistakes. We have Bathsheba and killing of Uriah. And so it's not that saying that he's perfect and that he does mess up. And he does at times lose that fear of the Lord. But, or maybe I should say lose, but maybe forget.
He doesn't focus on it. Yeah.
He always comes back to it. And he's very repentive. And
then he brings it to God. Like the children of Israel, when they were in the wilderness and they grumbled and God got onto him, not because they grumbled to him, because he's the only one that can do anything about it. They grumbled to each other and it's very infectious. David, like in chapter 6, he said, my soul is greatly troubled. He brings it to God.
Yes.
And that's good.
That is very good.
Yeah.
I found something, I thought this was interesting. Because sometimes people think they're just a random group of poems or songs put together. And there's something called, I don't know how to say it, chiastic. It's symmetrical arrangements in sections.
Oh, that's
what it means.
That's a chiasm. Chiastic.
Thank you. Okay.
Yeah.
I knew I was saying it wrong. Chiastic.
That's all in the Bible, even in Genesis. Chiasms. Yeah.
So this type of arrangement, this symmetrical arranging in sections, this shows intentional editing, not a random collection. And so like all the laments, the framing hymns, all of that, they're in a very specific type of arrangement. So sometimes I think if you're just reading quickly, it could seem random, but I think that's interesting to note that it's not. It's very intentional how it's arranged.
Yeah, and the chiasm, it is like a treasure hunt because it takes you to a deeper level because the author is burying something he wants you to find. And they're like ABC, CBA is inverted. And there's different ones like poems and all that. And usually the hidden message can be at the center sometimes. But yeah, I can't believe
it's like peeling an onion.
Yeah, chiasms are cool.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
I'm glad you know how to say it.
I wouldn't, but I had been actually I started over in Genesis, so I'm all about it, you know. But and I have another good one. It says, "My shield is with God who saves the upright." I do think we need to be like David, and he is humble, but he's also a fighter, and he's not afraid to pick up that shield because Paul refers to all of the armor that we need, and we are in a battle, which we've read that Joe Bean book, Seeing the Unseen. We don't need to put our head in the sand and think that everything is hunky-dory because we are in a battle. And David knows that better than anyone. I mean, I haven't had a spear thrown at me today, but I mean,
we do know how it ends. So
yeah.
we don't need to be all gloom and doom. We know how it ends. We know who the victory goes to. So,
but be prepared. Put on that armor. Be prepared. Put on the armor. Yeah.
But don't despair.
I didn't know if you realize in Psalm 8:2 is a saying that people say all the time, and it's from Psalms. So David wrote this, out of the mouths of babes. So have you heard that saying?
I have. I wonder if that Shakespeare used it. And sometimes that happens. Shakespeare would use biblical things and then people attribute it to Shakespeare.
Yeah, that's probably what happened. But yeah, because David said it first. Yes, true. Very true. And then I think this is another sign of his humility in chapter 8 as well. What is man that you are mindful of him? There was a guy, Isaac Watts, he wrote a lot of songs, and he wrote one, "Alas, and did my Savior bleed?" And somewhere in it is the line that said, "For such a worm as I." And that song was sung for hundreds of years. And then in this current culture, people said, well, we're not worms. We're people. We're this. And they took that out. They took worm out and put one, for such a one as I. And I said, that shows you that the culture has changed some, you know, because to God, he said, what is man that you are mindful of him?
The pendulum swung. Again, I don't know why we can't find center, why we can't be centered, but the whole, I mean, you go back to the early 1900s, I think we've talked about this. The pendulum was over here where there was no love of God. It was very legalistic. This, very formulaic. And so, and the enlightening that happened in that, you know, all this movement, it was about the love of God. And that was a revelation. What? He loves me? But then the pendulum swung, and then it stayed over in love, and then there's no fear. But you need both.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I don't know why we can't find that middle ground. I feel like David did.
Because we go to ditch after ditch. We go to one ditch and go in the other. And then in Psalm 14, it's a community lament. So there's different kinds of lament. Like David could be lamenting by himself, or he could have a community lament, and which is telling like a difficult time. And I think it's huge that these were the laments that they could say when bad times were happening to them, when judgment came, and then they could have these. Well, I mean, it just expresses what you're saying, because sometimes when you're in the midst of that, it's really hard to say, but David already said it, so they just repeat. And these guys knew the Bible because they didn't have a Bible, so they recited it, you know. And I think you know, just the fact of when it's an individual lament, David says, I give thanks with my whole heart. And I think David is one of those, he's all in. He's all in. And I think that's beautiful.
When you were saying that, it made me think of, we do the same thing, or our society does, with music. You know, when you're upset, you don't listen to a happy, upbeat song. Usually you want something that has that lament to it about someone else's problems. that you're not alone. And I feel like that's the same. There's something powerful in music, something that can reach the spirit in a different way that words just can't. But poetic words, music with the words, there's something very beautiful about that and profound and somewhat healing too. It's so I see that that was what David was doing by documenting every stage of the human experience almost. There's something for any time. If you're extremely happy, if you're extremely sad, if a king's trying to kill you, I mean, it's all there.
Yeah, he has something for everyone. And hidden in there, I think it's chapter Psalm 18. It is the one that you should recognize. Bend a bow of bronze. And I thought of you guys reading the bronze bow. Well, I
Mm-hmm.
thought, wow, that's pretty cool. And
That is cool.
I do think that the symbolism and all that is so powerful that, I think Jesus the one that said, "We played a dirge for you and you did not mourn, and we played and you did not dance." God is a God of celebration, and he's also the God of mourning, both. He's both. I think we need to realize that God put these a gambit of emotions, and we can't be stoic all the time. I mean, he wants us to celebrate. Jesus's first miracle was at a wedding. So, and I think David embodies that so well. He's dancing, and then he's weeping. I mean, he's and I think in our society probably that we would think he was kind of an emotional roller coaster or something. But life is like that. You have ups and downs, and
And I think sometimes we highlight one emotion above the others when really God made them all. So I think all of them are the human experience. And we want happiness. But really every season, every one of those emotions, they have something for you. So does that make sense? Like we highlight one, like we just want to live in the happiness realm, but
Mhm.
really there's a lot to learn in the grief realm. There's a lot to learn in what other emotions did you mention?
Well, like even meditating, like
Yeah,
going and being quiet with God, even before you pray, if you just take a couple minutes and be silent. And because we're very uncomfortable with silence, because we have stuff going on all the time, but just to sit in the silence, because God made that as well,
that's
and
true.
there's one where David says, I um, because in Psalm 13 it says he's talking about feelings and that feelings don't equal the truth, kind of, and he trusts in God's steadfast love. So even I like what you said one time on another podcast. You said something about we need to leave space for mourning because mourning is uncomfortable and people don't like to do that. But man, Jesus showed us how to do that with at Lazarus's tomb. He wept, and I think it makes us uncomfortable. So we just don't, a lot of people
And
don't even go to
yeah,
funerals.
I had a friend recently who lost her dad tell me that she just doesn't want to be a burden to, she doesn't want to be sad around people. She doesn't want to pull the group down. She doesn't. So, but again, I really like the idea that people used to do where they wear
Mm,
the armband or there's some physical sign that you are in grief. Maybe they had mourning clothes. When you saw someone in these certain clothes, you knew they lost someone close. I wish we could get back to that as a society. I think that's important for us to know, let's hold space for this person. Because
mhm,
sometimes you don't know. And then sometimes you do and you forget because your life is even though we don't have that, we need to make a concerted effort
mhm.
to hold space for people who are grieving and to say, you are not a burden. It is okay. Like, that's part of the human experience
Yes, I
is
think God
grief.
God said it is not good for man to be alone. So we're
Hmm.
built for community. There's a beautiful book by Eleanor Estes. I can't remember if it's Rufus M or Ginger Pie or one of those. It's a classic in kids lit. But somebody at that time they were in a war, and there was a different colored ribbon for if you had someone in battle, it was one color, but if you lost someone, it changed
Mm.
color and stuff. And so everyone in the neighborhood would know. So I think that's yeah, just to be in community and give you always say, let people feel the weight of you, but you do have to look for that. You have to allow space and say, okay, well, I see the ribbon changed. So that means her brother didn't make it. And we need to, I think that's why some really thoughtful people, I wasn't brought up that way, but I have a friend and she's like, I got to take some flowers over there. I got to make a casserole or something. Cause that's what she wants to do something. Because if you ask someone, I think we talked about this, if there's anything I can do, well, then you just put another burden on them.
Yeah.
Just do it. Wash the car, bring a casserole, just do it. And don't ask and put something on them. I'm like, here's somebody who's lost in grief and you're putting another to do thing, So no, I do think that I think Jefferson Fisher mentioned that too. Just do it. Don't hem haw around. And I know why people do that though. I'm gonna give them a lot of grace too, because they just don't know. And they don't want to make the wrong decision, because what if you take a blueberry pie and somebody's allergic to blueberries and I see it. But I think 9 times out of 10 they might not be. So just go with it. And if they are allergic, they can give it to their neighbor and someone will be blessed with that blueberry pie. But I'm thinking
now I'm wanting some blueberry pie.
And I don't even know. One of my favorites is Psalm 19, as you know, and I think the boys memorized it, starting with verse 7 through 11. And David just goes and hammers how much he loves the law of the Lord. And he calls it the law. The law of the Lord is perfect, reviving the soul. The testimony of the Lord is sure, making wise the simple. The precepts of the Lord are right, rejoicing the heart. The commandment of the Lord is pure, enlightening the eyes. The fear of the Lord is clean, enduring forever. The rules of the Lord are true and righteous altogether. And then he talks about them being more to be desired than gold and sweeter than honey. And at the end on verse 11 there, it says, moreover, by them is your servant warned. In keeping them, there is great reward. I think that's just beautiful.
That is beautiful.
And that, man, chapter, and so I think it was when I found that it just kind of spoke to me. So in jail, we usually stay in the Gospels and in Acts. But then I started throwing in a psalm, and it's you're not going to read a whole psalm usually, but like several verses. Like Psalm 119 is good because it's alphabetical and it's like an acrostic poem. But we did that, and man, those ladies just love that. So I really think it's good to have a psalm. It's different. It has a different cadence. It's totally different. And that's why they used to have those little Bibles that had the New Testament and then it had Psalms and Proverbs. Because there's something, either like you said, you're going to be either rejoicing or lamenting. David has you covered.
Yeah.
He's got you.
That's my favorite way to read Psalms. In the Bible studies that I've done, there is some that will take you straight through it and you're reading it just like you read any other book. But I do prefer when the reading plan has a little Psalms every day.
Sprinkled in.
It's sprinkled in every day. There's something about it, and it's beautiful just to have a little bit of every day in the Psalms.
Well, you are always talking about like your rhythms and routines and everything. I think that is like that's your rhythm. That can be a rhythm that you put in your Bible study. Just say, okay, I'm reading this, and then I'll go back and get and then that, to me, that'll it's not a garnish, but it helps you. It usually always, when I do that, it connects with what I'm reading. It's amazing, but you'll think, oh, wow.
It's the living word.
Yeah. God can do all things, so he can.
So let's talk about how it points to Christ, which is so cool. There's a lot of Psalms, especially in the Davidic Psalms, that are quoted in the New Testament about Jesus, like the suffering, betrayal, kinship. And so we're talking about this book 1. It really shows that our need for the perfect king.
And I had that, but I wrote it down somewhere, but I wanted to say maybe it's either Isaiah or Psalms is quoted the most in the New Testament, but I couldn't remember. But I mean, yeah, definitely pointing to Christ. But once again, I'm thinking, how did the Pharisees miss that? Because they knew this backwards and forwards, but yet they missed it. And I think, You know that saying, it's as plain as a nose on your face, but think about the nose on your face. You can't see it.
That's true.
If you don't have a mirror, you really can't see the nose on your face.
That's a good point.
And
maybe that's the deeper meaning of that saying.
yeah, maybe, because I'm like, well, because they missed it, and then it was someone in Bible class just last Tuesday. There was a lady, and she said they missed it because he was poor. He came with no fanfare. He didn't come like a king should come. He was very humble in his circumstances.
God usually doesn't. God doesn't
Yeah. He
answer
will
our prayers
surprise you.
the ways, all the time. So I don't know why we're surprised when he surprises us, because we almost should be expecting it's not going to go like I think. He's going to do something
that will
outside my thinking.
That will totally amaze you. It will totally amaze you. Yeah. I mean, I remember when I found out, surprise, we're going to have a baby after I had given everything away. And so this would be Cam, of course, because you were actually the only one that was planned. And I had a dear friend in Miami, and she said, the baby will be a blessing to you. We didn't know if it was a boy or a girl, but, and yeah. And I just said, God's full of surprises. He's never surprised, but he is full of surprise. And to me, that was, I mean, I thought I was ancient. I was 32 having a baby, you know.
And that's where people are beginning now.
Yeah.
So 32 that's the starting point. So you thought, yeah.
And of course, he's never had any I mean, he said, Mom, I was worth every stretch mark. I was worth it all.
He could not say that. I could say that. I've had kids. He could not say that.
But I think that, I loved what Jonah said when he was having trouble with something. He said, what is God wanting me to notice? What is God wanting me to see? And a lot of times I'm thinking God can throw you a curveball, because we're pretty pig-headed sometimes. Like, we think we know what God wants us to do. We're like Sarah. Hagar, where are you? Let's speed this. Let's speed this up.
God can be helping us and answering our prayer, and we totally miss it and not notice it because we're so focused on our idea of how it should be answered that we have to step back maybe, or something happened. We're like, oh, God was working that out all along.
Yeah. I feel like the coyote in the Roadrunner sometimes, like, boom, oh, that's it. Because, and then maybe years later, you see that God had a plan, and he always, and all the worry that we put into things, that God, instead of just trusting God, even the ladies, when they were going to the tomb after Jesus had been crucified and put in the tomb, they're worried about, how will we get the tomb open? How will we roll that stone away? Well, when they got there, the stone was already rolled away and the tomb was empty. And I think, how many times have I done that? I'm like worried about something that I shouldn't be worried about. I've took the Martha road, and I hear Jesus saying, Martha, Martha, oh, the house is a wreck. Instead of saying, yeah, come on in, and visiting, just to visit with people and not worry about the, every little thing being in order and stuff. I think God wants that.
You pulled out a key word, trust. So let's go back to that. I think because David that's what we see in Psalms. We see him trusting God. And he kind of shows us this prayer model too to follow, that to bring our complaints, to bring our fears, to bring our praises without a filter. Just bring it to God. And that shows trust. We're giving him everything and we're trusting him. Like, we don't have to carry that. We don't have to worry about it. But it's good to talk to God about it. That moves us towards trust. We're giving it to him. And I think David did so well at that. And we see that in this first book of Psalms, just how he does that. Like, he just lays it all out. Good, bad, the ugly, and everything in between. And that's what I want to be like.
Yeah, well, I think we think about Psalm 23, which it gets a ton of press. It's a very popular one.
That's a good one.
But I mean, the Psalm 22 is also, my God, why have you forsaken me? That's the one Jesus quoted on the cross. And everybody thinks, oh, God was forsaking him. No, it was hard times. And that would be the psalm people would quote when they're in the midst of that. And just to have David already have written that down. And then Psalm 21 says, oh, Lord, in your strength, the king rejoices, and in your salvation, how greatly he exults. You have given him his heart's desire. I mean, you could just tell highs, lows, and I really think Psalm 23 is a little bit of both, because it goes with both of them.
And maybe that's why it's a standout one.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's short. I think that's it.
Yeah, no one's memorizing Psalms 119, right?
Nobody's
the
going
longest
to.
book in the Bible. I'm sure someone has, and I want to know if you have, because that's amazing.
Kudos to you. Yeah. Psalm 23 has 6 verses. Psalm 22 has 31. And Jesus, just by saying the first line, was probably in his head going over all of those, the whole thing. And yeah, I just think we're so blessed. And I don't know if I always thank God for having a Bible that I can go and reread on my own and reread, whereas in the past they didn't have that. And we need to be thankful that we have that. I mean, I'm trying
so many
to put
people have died because of the Bible.
Yes. I'm trying to put it in my head and in my heart and all that, but hey, the older you get, the harder that is. But to have a copy of it, is beautiful. And here's another one on 25, chapter 25, verse 8. Good and upright is the Lord. Therefore, he instructs sinners in the way. He leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble his way. I mean, I think humble may be something there. I think
Definitely.
David got that, though. He did. Because at one point, he has this guy, Joab, who it's almost like he doesn't like Joab. I get the feeling that he does not like him. He's like, feels like Joab's bloodthirsty and stuff like that. Like, why?
It feels that way because he murdered a couple of people. So there's a reason it feels that way.
But have you ever in your lifetime, especially in high school, you've got friends and you notice that you have this one friend that you're wondering, how are we friends? Why are we friends? I think that's what David sometimes thought with Joab, like,
well,
why
because
are you
they
here?
They battled together. They had history together. Joab stood by him. Mm-hmm. So there's loyalty there. There's warriorship there, or they've
Which
battled
is
it out. So I mean, but yes, and I will say, Joab did not like that he did the census. So that was Joab's shining moment.
Yeah, that is. Yeah, I'm glad you thought of one. That is so true. That is true.
And I feel Joab is a complex character, and I think he was a good guy. I do. I think he did become bloodthirsty, and I think that would be hard not to when you are killing all the time. When your job is killing people, I could totally see how you become numb to that.
And like what David was a man after God's own heart, and that's where we want our heart to be, not after, because that's why it's good to ask questions.
Very good.
And, and like you always say, truth will stand up to scrutiny. Truth will, but lies won't. So if we ask questions,
truth doesn't need to yell.
Oh, that's true.
Most of the time, if something's being yelled at you, it's probably not truth.
Because the volume is taking, that's all, we don't have anything to say, so we're going to say it loudly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You kind of see that in people.
Yeah.
If they have something to say, you're not going to be screaming it.
Yes. Well, that is a wrap on the book 1 of Psalms, which is 1 through 41. And it really invites us into this raw, honest relationship with God. And I have a challenge. I want you to pick one psalm from the book, from this, what we talked about, book 1, which is 1 through 41. Pick one of those psalms this week and pray through it. And then I want you to share it with us on our socials or in one of the reviews. I would love that.
Yes, we would. And we just want you to know how much it means for you to join us. And we just I hear from actual people that listen, and I love the feedback. And you mean so much to us that we're on this journey together of not only reading books, but reading God's word. And let us be like David and seek that closeness with God that is so amazing. He offers it, and let's do that. And
do you have a psalm? Why don't we end on one?
Do I have a psalm?
Yeah.
Well, I have
Here, I have one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've already said mine.
You have. Psalms 34:5 says, "Those who look at him are radiant, and their faces shall never be ashamed." So let's look at him. Let's be radiant. Let's look at God.
We are made in his image, so we cannot be that if we don't know what he is like. Yeah, and the attributes of God are all in the Psalms. I also had another thing to do that people that are like me might think it's fun. You could do all the letters of the alphabet as you're reading through Psalms, the attributes of God, like God is a rock, put R for rock and all that kind of stuff. And I love doing that.
The ABCs of Psalms.
Yeah, it's fun.
I like it.
Yeah. It might even go on to Proverbs as well. But we thank you so much for stopping by. So let's connect
to reflect.
We'll catch you on the next one.